How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing well.
Awesome,
Happy New Year.
awesome. It's been a while since we really cohabitated together.
Yes, it has.
We're certainly glad to see you, glad that you joined us. So let me just give a little background to our audience of who you are. So of course, I mentioned your name is Jonathan Ferguson. Your occupation is in the area of management. You have a master's in leadership from Nova Southeastern University. You have a bachelor's in business administration from Florida International University. And you've been happily married, I'm absolutely certain, to a beautiful young woman by the name of Carla for 23 years. Woo! Most marriages don't last that long this day, but we're certainly glad yours did. So let's get right into our topic for tonight. My father, my hero. So let's talk about AKA the professor.
Okay.
I have a picture here of him, and I want to show it to the audience, your parents, your beautiful parents, to the audience. So let's do this. Let's see if we can make this happen here. Yeah, there you go. There they go. How about tell us a little bit about them, their names, and how long they've been married?
All right. My father, we call him Professor, but his name is Othniel Ferguson.
Okay.
He was named after one of the first judges in the Bible.
Right.
My lovely mother, Julia Ferguson.
Okay.
They've been married for 53 years last month.
When?
Last month made 53 years they've been married.
Awesome. That is great. That is great. And they're great people. And one thing I can say about your father in meeting him, and since I've known him, he's always been consistent with who he is. And I love that about a man such as himself. So what description or what can you share with us what type of person your father was to you growing up?
Well, just as you mentioned, and just as we've seen, he's always been consistent. Growing up, he's always been very firm, very direct, very stern. The backstory, my father has some older children, and me and my sister were among the last two that he had. So growing up, he was a lot older than most of my friends' parents. And what I've noticed, children from parents that are a little bit older, they get a different type of upbringing. My father didn't believe in playing around. He really didn't believe in sports. The first time my father and I ever shot hoops or anything, I was 43 years old.
Wow.
And because of how he grew up, where he grew up, my father's from the Turks and Caicos.
Okay.
My mother, she's from the Bahamas. When he came over here, he was 50. No, I'm sorry. He was 25 the first time he hit a light switch.
Wow.
So it gives you some of his background. Growing up on the islands, not that you needed anything or knew that you were poor. It's just the way he grew up. By the time I came along, it wasn't a whole lot of time for games and playing.
Right.
Everything was about preparation for being a man, being responsible, and going forward in life. So I've never known him to hang out. I don't think he's ever been to a friend's house more than once in a month growing up. He's just always been very focused on work and family and God.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So he was definitely family and God-centered, basically.
Always.
Awesome. So what's the principal thing that you would say that your father believed in?
He always believed in education and action. Now, obviously, that's two things instead of one, but his thing was always about being prepared to act, be prepared to do whatever needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when things come your way, you have to act. A lot of people, they will either wait They want to think about it. But his thing was, when you come up against an opportunity or a situation, you act. In leadership, we call it the responsibility, the
Right.
ability to respond.
Right.
You have to always prepare yourself. So whatever comes down the pike, you have to be able to jump in and take control of yourself if you can't take control of the situation. And that's how he raised us. That was his main focus on me.
So he didn't wait around for somebody else to fix whatever came along. He took action himself. He made himself responsible for those things that, let's just say, came in his territory, in which that he felt that he needed to handle, he needed to deal with.
Very much so. There was no second person or another phone call. It was just him. It was always him first, him always. And he was always there.
Did you ever hear him make excuses or give a reason of not to do something that he felt needed to be done?
No, that isn't his style. That wasn't his style. If he didn't do anything, he just flat out changed his mind.
Right, right. So in essence, he was a man who took action. He took initiative.
Yes, even to this day.
Still, how old is he now?
He just turned 93.
Wow. And he still gets around, right?
He gets around, he cuts the yard. He does whatever he feels he wants to do. Perfectly healthy.
Wow, man.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing for him. It's a blessing for me, because even at this age, I get to look and speak to my father and get information directly from the source.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I think that's a blessing to have your father that long. And you're 51 years old, right?
Yes, I am.
So to have your father that long, even at the age of 93, and to see him taking action, not just, again, as you stated, I heard you say, even today, if he sees something needs to get done, he's going to go and get it done. He ain't getting on the phone, calling, whatever. He gonna find a way to make it happen.
No. And he's not going to be on the phone long either.
So, Barrett, that sounds like he's not a gossiper then, basically, huh?
No, not at all. No, never.
Great. So my next question then, what's the one thing you say that would upset your father?
Anytime you would make excuses or just half-heartedly doing things. That is one thing that would set him off quicker than anything else. Growing up, my father had his own construction company. I was blessed to be able to work with him. From the time I was 5, he would have me out doing work. Mm-hmm. That's where, and that was mostly the only time he really talked. Once he got to work, things got going. And once everything got going into a good rhythm, that's when he would sit down, and while working, he would explain things to me, express things to me. That's when he would talk. Wow. And if at every time, like he asked me to, whether I was digging a footing or if I needed to get some tools or whatever had to be done, if it was lackadaisical or if it was just half-hearted or just halfway done, that would set him off quicker than anything.
What would be his reaction though? In what way? When you say set him off, let me rephrase the question. If he sees something, if he saw something or someone doing something half-heartedly, let's just say even you, how would he approach that?
If it were me,
yes,
it would probably get physical. He couldn't stand and can't stand to be around somebody who's not giving their all or not really into it. If you say you're going to do it, do it. If you're not going to do it, then just say you're not going to do it or just leave. Or he's very straightforward, black and white. There's not a whole lot of gray area. There's just do or don't do.
Right. But yet in all of that, though, he was a loving father, though.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just all yelling, screaming, and trying to get physical. There was a method to it. Obviously, when you're younger, you don't quite understand it. But as you get older, you start to realize there's a difference between correction and just trying to yell at somebody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Because again, some of the biggest takeaways, again, having a much older father, a lot of it, I just thought he was just old, or he was just not fun, or he was. But a lot of it had to deal with I had to get old enough and get enough experience to be able to truly receive the information he was given. The funny backstory to us calling him Professor. As a teenager, we called him Professor because we thought he knew everything. He's like, yeah, he's always talking, he don't know anything. And, teenagers tend to think they know more than their parents.
Absolutely.
After I moved away and I lived in New York, went to college for a couple of years, for about 3 years. In those 3 years, I grew and gained experience. So when I came back home, I was amazed at how smart he was. He really seemed to know everything. And I had to grow to the point where, you know what? It might be best if I just listen to him, because somebody who's lived that long and had those experiences kind of know what they're talking about.
Right.
You who haven't been anywhere and don't know anything, you start to realize, yeah, I may be able to read a book faster, but am I really smarter or more experienced?
Right.
And that's when our relationship got better, because I had reached the point where I could really receive the information he was trying to give.
That sounds like something, a point that I had came into as far as my father's concerned. And I tell my sons, this is what I learned about when you talk about wisdom. And I always use this analogy: if my father and I are standing outside and I'm looking at the sky and it's blue, and he's looking up there and he's telling me it's black, then I'm going to go with the fact that it's black because apparently there's something he knows that I don't know. So that's just a way in which that I look at accepting wisdom, because that's what I call it. Basically, I call it wisdom. We're not going to know everything. And then also another narrative: no matter how old I get, even though I have my own children, no matter how old I get, I would never outknow the wisdom of my father.
And that was one of the things I had to come to. The conclusion is, no matter what I know, where I've been, I can never make up that gap of all those years he lived before I was even born. He has that much more knowledge, wisdom, experience. Again, when he was growing up in the Turks and Caicos, what him and his friends used to do for fun, they would get in a boat, sail across the ocean. They would go to Haiti. They would go to Venezuela. They got in a boat and did these things the way we used to ride our bikes around the neighborhood.
Right.
You can't match that type of experience. You can't. There's no way you could surpass that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's great. So in all of your saying, it sounds like your dad was definitely a disciplinarian. And if you answer that, I'd like for you to be more specific when we talk about, because that's what it sounds like. Him being focused, he doesn't like any half-heartedness. He's straightforward, black and white, very little gray areas. So when it came down to him being a disciplinarian, what type of disciplinarian was he?
I'll give a funny little story. Well, it might not be so funny to my oldest brother, but obviously back in the day, there was no cell phones. My father, he worked in Delray. We live in Hollywood. And my oldest brother, he went to school, was cutting up like you usually do. Word got to my father. Obviously, he wasn't there that day, but the next day he showed up and he disciplined my brother in the class where he was cutting up, because his speech was, if I have to take off from my work to come to your work, this is how I'm going to handle it. So if you want me to come to your work, this is how we're going to work this out. That was his version of discipline. Everything that came after that was about setting the tone.
Right, right.
But in addition to that, you had to be responsible for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be accountable, whatever it was you were supposed to be doing, whether it was school. That's why even now I refer to school as work, because your job is to go to school, which is your work. That's your job.
Right.
So when I speak to the younger ones in the family, did you go to work today? How was work? And they look at me, but that's the way my father related to me. This is your job until you get another one.
Right.
And that's where the discipline comes in. And again, it wasn't anything to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of setting the tone. As long as you were where you were supposed to be, doing what you were supposed to do, you never had to worry about anything. Right. And that carries on even today to my job or anything else I do, even within my marriage. As long as I'm where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to do, I never have to worry about answering any questions or giving up excuses or starting off stories with, and then one thing led to another. And you avoid all of that because you start off from the proper place.
Right, right. Were he very supportive of you, your activities?
He was. Again, he wasn't into sports, so he never encouraged us in the sports realm. His thing was he pushed us into the arts, particularly into music.
Right.
My first instrument was violin, and I moved on from there. He was very supportive of that. Anything that had to do with talking about playing football or basketball, he viewed sports as games.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time or a few times I would ask him to take me to a football game or a basketball game or whatever. And his response would be, do you see anybody paying to come see me work? So why would I pay to go see somebody else's work? But anything outside of that, he was very supportive, particularly as long as it had to do with education, even in the arts, as long as it was something that would better you and better your life going forward. Those were the things he was always and still is very supportive of.
That's great. That's great. I want to ask one more question, because one of the things that I want to point out, there's a lot of great substance that you have shared with us concerning your father. And it's obvious that it's things that that substance and points in which that other fathers can grab a hold to and they can move forward. You know, even back to where you talk about your father and his discipline method. I think many of our guests that are watching, I'm absolutely certain they have parents that they can relate to their moments as well. But nevertheless, though, moving right along, because we don't want to tarry very long. But I have one more question I'd like to ask you. What was name the one thing that you would say that your father instilled in you as a man?
Something that he says even to this day, and he says it to everyone pretty much anytime: do your best. He always say, do your best and let God do the rest.
Mm-hmm.
If you do your best, you will always sleep well at night.
Wow.
And he's an ordained minister, and part of that has to do with, those things that could potentially keep you up at night, or those situations you're in the middle of the night still trying to work your way through, or after it's over, you're still talking to yourself days or weeks or years afterwards.
Right.
If you do your best, and he's always stressed that part, you never have to worry about laying awake or waking up in the middle of the night. Did I finish this? Did I do that? Was that correct? He always instilled, do your best at that very moment. Now, your best may not be 100%. I think we even spoke about that in marriage,
right.
100%, but sometimes my 100% may only be 50%. And my wife has to kick in an extra 50% in order to keep it going. Right. However that works, it's the same thing in life. Do your best. Whatever your very best is at that time. Even if you have the flu, but you showed up for work anyway, do your very, very best.
Do your best.
And as
That's
long as
great.
you, yeah, as long as you do that, you avoid having to give up those sorry excuses.
Mhm.
Because the other thing that he told me, and I had to learn this for myself, a lot of times when you're given an excuse, people won't always tell you that they or call you on. You know,
Mhm.
they'll just look and they'll blink their eyes and they just wait for you to finish and then they'll leave. The problem is when you give an excuse, just because you think you got over doesn't mean you got over.
That's good.
Somebody could always sniff it out, smell it out. They always know when you haven't done the best you could do.
Well said. So that's great. I like that. Do your best, you sleep well at night. That's good advice. That's good advice for everybody. What would you say? What is your assessment of fatherhood today? What is fatherhood to you?
Well, fatherhood for me, it extends beyond just the ones that you bring in. Fatherhood for me requires you being there, being an example, giving guidance, and leading not only the men but the young women that comes to you or come around you within your life. One of the reasons why I went through the leadership program, and I spent a lot of time being in human resources,
Mm-hmm.
and to me that was a business version of being a minister.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you can't always pray with someone when they're getting a write up, but by the same token, it's about giving life lessons. It's about helping people get to a better situation or
Right.
seeing it differently, whatever it would do to improve them, or giving them that little piece of information that would allow them to make better decisions. So, being a father means sharing your experiences, sharing your knowledge, sharing the things that you see, because a lot of times you've already known or been to the dead end of that road. And when
Right.
you see the younger ones going down that road, you can't stop them from going. But at least if you share the information, they might stop before they get to the total end of the road.
That's it.
And those are the things I try to give just to spare someone,
Right.
because a lot of what my father did allowed me to skip over a lot of that adolescent finding yourself,
Mm-hmm.
the adolescence that men go through between 15 and 30, some
Wow.
35 or 40.
Wow. Wow.
That experience allows you to figure it out before you get to the end of the road or go over the cliff.
That's great, man. That's great. Wow. That's wholesome. That is very good. How many siblings do you have?
I have four,
Okay. Okay. Boys, girls.
uh, three boys, a girl.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, I am certainly glad that I think you shared a lot in the short time that we're being on here. And I want to thank you. You have any last words for the other men that may be on this channel and listening tonight?
One of the first and main pieces I feel when it comes to men, and this goes almost any place in life, you have to build or surround yourself with a group of people looking to go forward. A lot of times we get into our silos and it's hard for us to get out of our own mess because we either don't know anybody or we don't talk to anybody. Sometimes we are all going through the same situation. Some have seen it. They could relay something to you to help you get through whatever it is you're going through, whether it's being a father, being a man, at your job. We always talk about getting a mentor. I would
Right.
say always get yourself a mentor. Find someone who's been there and done that. Now, it doesn't mean that they did everything right,
Right.
but those who have been there and done that, they still have information they could give you. I
Absolutely.
always remember that commercial, you could learn a lot from a dummy. You can learn a lot from a dummy because a lot of them will tell you, I tried that, I wouldn't go there. But don't be afraid to talk and surround yourself with men.
I'm glad you said that. That's the whole purpose of this platform. And because I'm a firm believer, and my whole objective is to get the word out, or let's say, as men, let's be transparent that even whether or not as being a man, as being a father or a grandfather, we make mistakes. We don't always get it right. At times we're going to make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong. But as long as we have God's breath in our body, we live another day, we can make that change. We can make that correction. And that's what this whole platform is about. So I certainly appreciate you coming on, you sharing.
May I add just one other piece to it? Don't be afraid to let some friends go in order to get ahead. Because sometimes the crew that you are with or the ones you're surrounded with, they may not be enough. If you want to go higher, surround yourselves with people who are higher. You can't always stay in the same place and expect better results.
They not going the same direction you're going, they are a drag. That's what I say to that. So, hey, again, my brother, thank you so much. Let me put up Mr. Professor's picture one more time here so the folks can see this great man, your father, your hero, Mr. Othniel, Professor Ferguson. Shout out to this great man, 93 years old. That is awesome. That is awesome. And as you say, he's still cutting his own grass, huh? I hope I can be able to do that.
I live next door to my parents, for those of you who don't know. Not only does he cut his yard, he cuts my yard too. That's the strength that he has.
Wow.
Now, he runs over my sprinklers, but I'm sure everyone would be happy to have a 93-year-old father who could still do that.
That is great. That is great. That's awesome, man. Listen, again, I tell you, this was awesome. Appreciate you taking the time out your busy schedule. Say hello to my sister for me. Tell I love her, and tell her thank her for allowing and sharing you with us tonight. So that'll be all for tonight. Thank you for visiting A Father's Note. We out.